Okay, I think we're ready. There might be a few more folks that join us. And good evening, everyone, and welcome to the climate conversation tonight, connecting Canada's climate action plan with opportunities for Bowen Island. My name is Bonnie. I think I know most people here tonight. I'm the Manager of Environment here at the municipality, and Carla Scoos is the Environment Coordinator, and we are acting as co-hosts tonight. It's Carla there. I want to acknowledge that we live and work on the traditional territories of the Squamish, the Musqueam, the Tsleil-Waututh, and the Sechelt nations. And on behalf of Bowen Island Municipality and the Environment and Climate Action Advisory Committee, which some of the members are here tonight, and also Councillor Nicholson and Councillor Hawking, who sit on the Climate Action Committee, are here tonight as well. And I see Councillor Morse is here as well. And I would like to thank everybody for attending this climate conversation. And also thank you to MP Patrick Weiler and a member of his communications team, Cassandra Sawtell, for joining us tonight and providing a presentation. In a few moments, I'll turn the floor over to David Hawking to do a formal introduction. But I just wanted to just do a little bit of housekeeping, and I'm sure everybody's so familiar with the Zoom land, but please do keep yourself muted. There will be, after the formal introductions, there'll be a 15 to 20-minute presentation by Patrick, followed by a question and answer period. And during that time, you can raise your hand, and Carla will be noting the order of hands, and I will be monitoring the chat and reading those comments out. I do want to mention that tonight's session is being recorded. So if you do want to remain anonymous, please keep your camera off. And a link to the session will be loaded onto our Climate Action Program webpage, the municipal webpage for Climate Action Program, within the next week. So you can pass that information along to folks that were unable to attend tonight. I think that's about it. Yeah, so please just keep muted unless you are providing feedback, comments, questions. That would be fantastic. So yeah, I think that's everything. And I'll pass the floor over to Councillor Hawking to introduce Patrick formally.
Thank you very much, Bonnie, and hi everybody. Very pleased to see all the folks who are here. So I'm really pleased to be able to introduce our Member of Parliament, Patrick Weiler, because I got to know him fairly well over the last couple of years, and we share many of the same values, particularly around the importance of protecting the environment and addressing climate change. But a little bit about Patrick's background. Before being elected as an MP, he worked as a lawyer in environmental and natural resource management and in international development. During his career, he's worked with governments around the globe to improve the management of aquatic ecosystems, as well as the governance of natural resource sectors on behalf of the United Nations and other international development agencies. Patrick has represented First Nations, municipalities, small businesses, and nonprofits on environmental and corporate matters within the riding throughout BC and internationally. As an MP, Patrick currently sits on the Standing Committee on Natural Resources, the Standing Committee on Government Operations and Estimates, and he is a member of the Bipartisan Climate Caucus and Tourism Caucus. Academically, Patrick received his law degree from UBC after a BA from McGill, and he lives in West Vancouver with his partner Nicole, where they often volunteer to foster cats for a local nonprofit. Now, in terms of tonight's agenda, I know that Patrick is pleased to be part of a government that is taking climate change seriously. And so he will give us an overview of Canada's plan and then help us better understand how that can tie into opportunities for us to take action here on Bowen. So Patrick, over to you.
Well, thank you very much for the kind introduction, David and Bonnie, and I just appreciate everybody taking the time out of their busy day today to and beautiful evening tonight to join to learn a little bit more about the climate plan and what that'll mean for Bowen as well. But I should start by acknowledging that I am streaming from my constituency office, which is in the traditional unceded territories of the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam nations, and of course just on the other side of the water here. But it's you know, I'd really love to be able to do this in person. And actually, the last time I was on Bowen for official business was for the unveiling of the official name, the Squamish name of Bowen, which was and hopefully I don't mispronounce this, but Nuklelekwam. So that was really a special event, and I'm looking forward to coming to visit soon. But I also just want to tip my hat to Bowen on the work on putting together the climate strategy that you put together. You've been able to identify where the vast majority of emissions are coming from, which I understand is in transportation, which is great because there's lots in the federal plan that addresses that. And you know, really looking at it in terms of opportunities as well. And that's very much how we look at it from the federal level as well. And I do have a bit of slides to go through here. So I was hoping we could open that up as I'm talking, just to kind of give a sense of some of the different areas. And maybe we can launch from there. So, first, I think probably starting at the high level, you know, we need to have a target to be able to measure progress. And for a long time, Canada was dealing with the Harper government target, which was 30% below 2005 levels by 2030. And about a month ago on Earth Day, we've committed to raising our target for 2030 to 40 to 45% below 2005 levels. So it's a very, very ambitious amount. And you know, our ultimate goal is by 2050 to get to net zero. And in order to do that, we have proposed a very robust strategy. It's really actually a couple strategies that have been put together. The first one was the Pan-Canadian Framework on Clean Growth and Climate Change, which was a climate plan announced back in 2017, where all of the provinces and territories, except for one, which was Saskatchewan, at the time had agreed to that. But that plan wasn't sufficient to get us to our 2030 targets, which in and of themselves weren't sufficient to do what the science is saying. And so our new target does line up with what's in Bowen's strategy, which is 40 to 45% below 2010 levels, I believe, according to the IPCC. And so we announced a new climate plan, a strengthened climate plan called A Healthy Environment and Healthy Economy in December. And so this builds on what was already done in the Pan-Canadian Framework, and then goes even further. And with that plan and with the money that we have in the budget this year, we have targeted that we can get to at least 36% below 2005 levels. And so we have more work to do. And just to give you an example of how much this can change, given the reliance of our economy and the size of the energy sector, if the price of oil is at $38, we would immediately increase our reductions by another 4%. So things like that can change it very significantly. And there's going to be lots of work to do to go further, but there's also tremendous opportunities. So Cassandra, maybe we can go to the next slide. But of course, setting a target is only important if you're actually going to be accountable to meeting it. And of course, Canada has set some, fairly ambitious climate targets over time, but never really had a real plan until recently to achieve them, and never had the accountability measures to actually, other than for people voting every 4 or less years, new government, to really keep governments accountable to doing that. And so we're hoping to change this with a bill that we tabled in December called the Canadian Net Zero Emissions Accountability Act. And this act has been debated. I've had a chance to debate it. It's now through the first and second readings. It's being looked at in committee right now. And we really want to pass this piece of legislation because it's not only going to keep our current governments accountable, but it'll keep future governments accountable to meeting those targets by a lot of different transparency and accountability measures. So what this bill will do is will require the government to set legally binding 5-year greenhouse gas reduction targets all the way up to 2050. There's going to be progress reports that you need to show along the way, including 3 years before you reach every target. After you reach a target, you need to do an assessment report that shows why you were able to meet it, and if you were not, the reasons why you were not. And that's actually very important because David mentioned my background working in environmental law. That's actually something that forms the perfect evidentiary base if you want to litigate against the government for not meeting targets. And that's actually one of the reasons why there has been a number of climate change related litigation that hasn't been successful. So that may change that dynamic a little bit. Each year, the government will have to report on all of the risks and opportunities related to government actions related to climate change. This is really important because it's not just the core operations of government, but it also includes crown corporations. So that's really important because organizations like Export Development Canada and the Business Development Bank of Canada, they have in the past been large financiers of fossil fuel projects. And so this will require having an accurate reporting on that and the risks related to that. And lastly, this, and not least, well, there's a Net Zero Advisory Board, which is going to advise the government, and also the Environment and Sustainable Development Commissioner will be doing special reports, and that's an independent officer of Parliament. So those are a number of different accountability measures that will be able to keep government accountable on the way to reaching our targets. Next slide, please. And so, as I mentioned before, the plan announced in December, healthy environment and a healthy economy, really is the framework that we're going to be utilizing to meet and exceed targets. And it's really focused on these 5 main measures. The last one, building Canada's clean industrial advantage. I won't go too much into detail of that tonight unless people have some questions about it. I'm really going to try to focus on some of the opportunities for Bowen, but of course, given that a huge chunk of Canada's emissions do come from industry, I do have some slides we can show about some of the programming there. But the first one is putting a price on. Oh, we can go into the first one here. The first area, which is really a key, the key feature of our climate plan, really is using pollution pricing. And that was, originally in 2017 as part of the Pan-Canadian framework, we brought in a price on pollution, which is actually a backstop price, in that if provinces don't bring in their own price, then this mechanism will apply. So I think it applies in about half provinces in the country, but it doesn't apply in BC because BC had a carbon tax back starting, I think, in 2008. And the commitment that was made in December was that beginning in 2022, we're going to increase the price on pollution by $15 a ton every year. So by 2030, we're going to be at $170 a ton. And this is really important for a number of reasons. On the one hand, it makes decisions for the consumer more expensive that are going to be more polluting. So you're not externalizing that cost on the environment. And really a key, it's also going to provide some certainty for businesses so they know they can plan and why they'll need to invest in reducing their own emissions. And the way that this system has been designed for other provinces, that the federal system applies, is that you get a rebate back so that the vast majority of families actually receive more in terms of the rebate than they pay through the carbon price. And so it'll be interesting to see how BC approaches this, because right now the carbon tax goes into general revenue, but I anticipate as that price escalates, there's gonna have to be some remedial measures to help with affordability for folks. So actually this year, BC's carbon price is $5 ahead of the federal one, but beginning next year, of course, they're going to be moving in unison. So next slide, please. Thank you. And kind of separate but related to the price on pollution is the Clean Fuel Standard. So Clean Fuel Standard, I won't go into this in much detail because it's very complex, but essentially what it does is it requires fuel providers to, over time, reduce the carbon intensity of the fuels they provide. And so each year it becomes a little bit more strict. And the idea behind this is that you can reduce emissions either upstream where the energy is produced, or downstream by supporting things like electric vehicles. And one of the things it's going to support are things like biofuels, things like hydrogen, lower carbon fuels to add to the mix over time, and but to do that in a way that is most cost efficient. Next slide, please. One of the ones that I think is a huge opportunity for Bowen is on home energy retrofits. And this is one of the things that I'm most excited that is in the budget for this year. Because actually in the fall economic statement, the first item there, we're providing $2.6 billion overall, and individual households can get a $5,000 grant to get an energy assessment done of their home. So if you go to the Natural Resources Canada website, you can look into that, and then you put in your postal code, and then you'll see a list of energy advisors that are approved. And then you can call them, and then they can come do that work, and it would be completely paid for. And it's important because once you get this energy assessment of your home, you can use that information. And later this summer, we're going to be putting together a program through the Canada Housing and Mortgage Corporation, where you can get a $40,000 no interest loan to actually implement some of those energy retrofits. So this is a great program because, you know, not only is it reducing your carbon footprint, it's saving you money on your heating bills, and it's going to create local jobs. And there's a big opportunity because we probably don't have the level of workforce that we're going to need to do this right across the country. So there's actually some ongoing work right now to support or to train up different contractors so they're going to be able to do this type of work. So I wanted to flag that one as a great opportunity, and it's one of those things that each and every one of us that are homeowners can look at doing. And there is an existing program as well through for bigger multi-unit residential buildings through the National Housing Co-Investment Fund that can do that as well. But that's not the same for individual households. Next slide, please. One that may be of interest for the municipality, there is a new fund to support retrofits for municipal buildings, for community buildings. This is actually, you can access this through the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. It's called the Green Municipal Fund. And it's a $1.5 billion fund over 3 years to do the same type of retrofits for community buildings. Likewise, through the Canada Infrastructure Bank, there is a program for larger commercial buildings to do the same type of work, and that's really meant to leverage some private money as well. One of the things we're working at the federal level is bringing in a new national building code. This is really going to be, they'll be more ambitious than the ones that we have right now. One of the tricky balances that we have to walk on this is we can't make it too ambitious, otherwise the provinces won't want to adopt it. But BC already has some quite progressive policies in place there with the STEP code, and I know Bowen's working hard in starting to implement the further steps up on that. And also one of the things we're working on right now as well that we announced in the budget is doing a national infrastructure assessment. So this is going to look at all of the infrastructure needs right across the country, which is going to be important for when we design future infrastructure programs. And one of the topics that I'm quite interested in trying to build into that is also looking at natural assets. I know the District of West Vancouver has done a lot of work on this to show how much the forests and the rivers and other areas provide. And the town of Gibsons has done some interesting work using natural infrastructure. And so I think there's some good models there. And one of the other things that's in the budget this year is an infrastructure fund specifically for natural infrastructure. So I know that's also something that Bowen's highlighted in the climate change plan. So I wanted to flag that as well as something that's provided we're able to pass the budget in the next month or so. that'll be a great opportunity for some of the things in the climate plan. Next slide. But of course, probably the most important one here is on transport, given that's 80% of the island's emissions. One of the programs that's been hugely successful right across the country, but especially in BC and in Quebec, because there is matching incentives, is the Incentives for Zero Emission Vehicles program. So this was a fund that I think was originally created in 2017, but the fund was fully tapped out in 2 years, and I think the fund was meant for 4 years. And there was huge take up in BC, where we actually have the fastest zero emissions vehicles adoption rate of any jurisdiction in North America. And so this program through the federal level gives you a $5,000 rebate on the purchase of an EV. But when you combine that with the provincial incentives, and if you are also going to scrap an old car, I think it's altogether it's $14,000 you can get. So this can really be a game changer. And when you calculate the operating costs you're going to save over time, it makes it very much cost competitive to get an EV. But one of the challenges is for people adopting EVs is range anxiety and not having enough charging infrastructure. And there is a program called the Zero Emissions Vehicle Infrastructure Program through NRCan, where you can get money to actually build EV charging stations in public areas. And so that program's actually delivered some charging infrastructure in Squamish recently and in Whistler as well. And there's an open call for proposals for the next month. So if that's something the island's interested in, definitely flag that as well. Next slide, please. And one of the challenges for a lot of people adopting EVs is difficulty finding EVs, because a lot of dealerships don't have them on their lots. And so that's one of the reasons there's a little bit less adoption. But we're also working on the fleet level with the United States and looking at ways where we can increase consumer availability, maybe having some level of a mandate. You know, one of the things that is also being discussed is having a day that you want to eliminate having internal combustion engine cars on the road. And with the new administration, there's much more alignment on that, and those are decisions that will be done with the U.S. because our auto sector is so integrated. So that's definitely one to keep an eye on. The other infrastructure programs, the National Active Transportation Strategy. This is one I'm very excited about, and I had a chance to lead a consultation with Andy Fillmore, who is the Parliamentary Secretary for Infrastructure. And he's actually the only MP who has ever had a professional certification as an urban planner. So he's the perfect person for this role. And we had about 150 people provide feedback from Western Canada on this strategy, which is going to be a key infrastructure fund to support things like separated bike paths, walking paths, things that will make it easier to move around on e-bikes or scooters. And right now the details are still being worked out of exactly what it's going to look like. But I know Bowen has a very ambitious strategy with the cross-island multi-use path that's planned. So this is one that I would keep an eye on for when it's going to be approved. And I'd also flag that there are some infrastructure programs that we work together with the province on, with the Invest in Canada Infrastructure Program, where it can fund these things as well. But I would definitely keep an eye on that one to move up the in-service date of that path before, I think it's 2038 or something of that matter. So I think we can move that up a little bit. But next slide, please. And one that I saw was highlighted in the Bowen Island climate strategy was electrification of ferries. And I think that's a really interesting one for Bowen, because it's the type of distance where you could actually build a ferry and run it on electricity that would be viable. I think it's a little bit more difficult if you're going to be going across to Vancouver Island or even to Langdale from Horseshoe Bay. But I think you could build it with the battery size that would be viable. And we actually have some leading companies based in Richmond actually that are focused on this. So I know it's a priority for BC Ferries. And if that's a priority for the island, definitely let me know, because I think there could be some opportunities there and ways we could be a leader. And I know some of the Scandinavian countries are looking at that as well, but there are some discussions happening right now on how to be able to accelerate that a little bit. Next slide. A big one related to this as well is on transit. There was a big announcement earlier this year, something that's been long sought after from municipalities right across the country in terms of having predictable funding for transit coming from the federal government. So the commitment's been made that there's going to be $15 billion in funding over the next 8 years for public transit, and then a commitment to provide $3 billion each year ongoing. So that's really important, especially for big projects that are planned, particularly like light rail or SkyTrain, things like that. But it also just allows governments and municipalities to plan ahead and to make those investments now, or to do some of the scoping work now so that they'll be ready to be able to build on that down the road. But there's also some component parts of that that are important. $2.75 billion of that is going to go towards zero emissions buses. And there's also about $500 million that's going to come from the Canada Infrastructure Bank for public transit as well. So that's going to provide quite a bit of funding. And last one I wanted to mention here, which is also one that we're doing some consultation work on, is the Rural Transit Fund. So it's a very small fund. It's a $250 million over 5-year fund, but what it's meant to do is to look at some of the innovative solutions for public transit in rural areas. And I think Bowen is an interesting kind of context for that, because one of the things it's looking at is potentially doing on-demand type projects and maybe working with private operators, but finding a way that can be reliable and affordable for people where it's difficult to have buses, for instance, coming at regular intervals. So I wanted to mention that, and if you have good ideas for that one, definitely let me know, because there's very active discussions happening right now on how that's going to look like. Next slide, please. And very important one as well is, and I know one that's in the Bowen strategy, is on nature-based solutions to climate change. The big one that most people focus on is the commitment to plant 2 billion trees right across Canada, which is an important one because it's going to be forestation work both in rural areas, but also in urban areas, which provides some opportunities. But also finding ways to expand, protecting what type of nature we already have here. And so likewise, we've made the commitment to protect 1/4 of our land by 2025. And so it's important that we do that in a way that's going to protect our most sensitive areas where they're acting as carbon sinks, like old growth in BC. So there's work being done there, working with partners like the Nature Conservancies to transfer private land into protected areas. I won't go into too much detail on the other ones in case people are, unless people are interested to talk about them later. But the last one that we're moving ahead on, which is in the news today, and that's the ban on single-use plastic items. So we did a science assessment that determined that plastic had an impact on humans and the environment, human health impacts. And the basis of that scientific assessment, we proposed a ban on 6 single-use items. And last week, we declared those items as toxic under the Canadian Environmental Protection Act, which allows the federal government to then regulate them. But actually, earlier today, there was a lawsuit filed to quash that decision from the plastics industry. So that's one to stay tuned on as well. Next slide. And then lastly here, just on adaptation, of course, it's great that we're focusing on projects to mitigate the worst impacts of climate change, but we're already seeing increasing climate variability and change. I don't need to explain that to anybody on the call here, but there are programs of the federal government to support municipalities which are facing the biggest costs associated with that, and oftentimes have the least ability to resource some of the solutions to it. So one of the most important programs is the Disaster Mitigation Adaptation Fund. This got some more funding in the budget this year to be able to make that available for small projects. So it used to be that you had to do a project of a minimum spend of 20 million, which made it very difficult for small municipalities to access it. So now I think it's down to 1 million this year. And so these are things that can be anything from, new culverts. It can be to help with landslide risks. It can be any number of different things. It could be for flood risks. There's a number of different areas that it can do. Including wildfire mitigation, which I know has been highlighted as well. And I think I mentioned the Natural Infrastructure Fund before, so maybe I'll skip that. And next slide, please. And yeah, so that's kind of a high-level view. I think I went a little bit over time here. I'm happy to talk about anything in there that people want a little bit more information on. And if people have questions on industry, I'm happy to go into that as well. But maybe I'll just stop it there and we can open it up for questions.
Can I just remind everybody, if you wanted to raise your hand or put a comment or a question in the chat, we will call upon you. Carla will be watching for hands and I'll be watching the chat.
I see Liam's hand up first. If you want to go ahead, Liam. You can unmute yourself.
I can also wait if there are others, because I can connect with MP Weiler offline perhaps later too. I don't want to dominate the questions, but I've got a couple that maybe are quick.
Sure.
You mentioned the National Infrastructure Assessment. Do you know if that will be built off of work done by StatsCan that was done in the last couple of years, or if that's a net new initiative?
I believe it's a new initiative. It's one that it hasn't launched yet. It's going to launch later this year. There was some kind of initial scoping work that's been done, but still the project hasn't launched. I would anticipate it would happen later this spring or early summer. Again, the details are not finalized at this point, but it's really it's to get a sense of what the infrastructure needs are right across the country to kind of inform what's going to be the next stage of the infrastructure program. So right now, Canada and BC have a bilateral agreement on how we're going to fund infrastructure. That one actually expires at the end of next year, and so we're going to be negotiating new ones, and this will kind of feed into program design and how to kind of fund the projects that'll be in the biggest needs.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. And then one question about the Rural Transit Fund. I know the province recognizes Bowen as rural, and the federal government does if it's a federal and provincial program, but not all federal agencies necessarily recognize Bowen as rural. And perhaps you can help us get that designation with all federal departments, or if you could also confirm whether or not we'd be eligible for that particular program.
Yeah, well, the program hasn't been finalized yet, so that's I can't say for sure, but this is a program that won't actually go through the province. It'll be direct from the federal government, so that will be something to build into that. I know because Bowen's part of Metro Vancouver, that's been an issue in the past, but that's a good flag for me to take back. Both for Bowen, but also for an area like Lions Bay. I know that's a big issue. Typically, the the threshold that's been used is communities that are less than 25,000 people. So, but by that measure, of course, Bowen would qualify. But that's a good flag, and one I'll share with folks in rural economic development to make sure that that's not going to inhibit it.
Okay, thank you very much, and an excellent presentation, by the way. Really appreciate the great work you're doing.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Liam. I saw Jackie and Phil with the hand up next, and I think after that we have Cynthia Nicholson, who I think might be Dawn Nicholson.
Okay, so I think my question's been answered, so I'm going to just lower my hand here.
Okay. Thanks, Phil. Dawn, did you want to go ahead, and then we'll go to Maureen after that? Just unmute yourself, though.
Does that work there?
Yeah.
Yeah, great presentation. Thank you so much. A lot of detail. I actually have a whole bunch of questions, but I'll try and focus in on a couple. So I guess overarching, how would you say that this revisited plan in December would match up to other nations in the context of you know, making the planet better? I'm going to throw out Germany, you know, some of the ones we think of as leading. Where would you say we would fit in?
Yeah, well, I don't know all of the details of Germany's plan. I know if you used our plan and you put it in the United States, we would be able to get much greater reductions than the targets that they've set right now. One of the challenges that Canada has in reducing emissions is that we already have a very clean grid. Our grid is already 82% clean because of abundant hydropower. So those are oftentimes some of the lower hanging fruit for emissions reductions. You know, obviously we have one of the most ambitious plans for carbon pricing. I think it's just Norway and Sweden that have a higher price on pollution than we do. You know, some of the ones that I didn't go into in the presentation are focused on industry, where we have some big challenges because we have a big energy sector in Canada. We have some hard work ahead of decarbonizing that, and there's a lot of focus in the budget this year on some of the moonshots, some of the investments that could really be game changers in that, because right now about a quarter of our emissions come from oil and gas.
Right.
And the second biggest one is on transport. So actually we have the least fuel efficient fleet of any country in the world right now. So that's something that we need to make some real progress on. So I think it's one of the most comprehensive strategies of any in the world, but we do have a big challenge in Canada that we are a natural resource producing country, and that's going to be the big thing to tackle over time. So I think it's a great strategy. It's had some very strong kind of reviews and assessments from people. Even like Thomas Mulcair has called it a marvelous strategy, and folks like Mark Jacquard and Andrew Weaver have been very complimentary. But right. we don't have all of the plans in place now to get to our targets. So there's certainly more work to do.
Yeah, just to pick up on that, I think people are probably going to speak to it, but I think it's called the International Energy Association. You've probably heard. So, you know, I heard the word bombshell, but it sounded like in a good way. But maybe there's some ammunition, because I was going to ask, you know, how's Alberta, in particular, singularly, you know, maybe there's some ammunition in that report to guide you in, because that's basically those people, as I understand it, are all about oil and fossil fuels. So for them to say that it can be done, it needs to have the political will. I'm sensing strong political will. But maybe, you know, maybe there's some guidance. I think David's I forwarded to him, but he was already halfway through the report. I didn't even look at it, but I just saw the headlines. But, you know, maybe there's some guidance there for you or for the government, because, you know, we do need to address the concerns that come from the industry that's going to eventually fade out. I mean,
yeah, no, I think that's a great point, and I think it is a major sea change for the International Energy Agency. I know traditionally they've been very conservative with their forecasting. You know, they have a history of greatly underestimating the rate of transition to renewables, and that's changed really over the last couple of years. But this is really the most ambitious forecast they've put out yet. And I think it speaks to the level of ambition that governments need to take. We're starting to see more of that around the world, which is great, but it's not going to be easy. There's going to be, I mean, there's, well, the fossil fuel sector is over 10% of Canada's GDP. And hundreds of thousands of people, but there are opportunities to decarbonize that. One of the things that report mentions is carbon capture, utilization, and storage as one of the technologies that are going to be key. We have a long ways to go of making that viable, but Canada has some of the world leading projects on that we can, if you can do it in kind of clusters, there's a way of doing it effectively. So there's some opportunities there. I think also hydrogen is a huge opportunity right across the country. You know, in BC, particularly with green hydrogen, but in Alberta to do blue hydrogen, which is when you get hydrogen from natural gas, but then you capture all of the carbon underground. So there are some, you know, assets and infrastructure and expertise that Albertans have. And the government's the provincial government's coming around to it now, which is you know, great, but it's something that there's going to be major challenges with the labor force there related to that. And one of the other areas I should highlight is in geothermal, and you know, moving to more and more renewables as well. Alberta has some of the highest potential for solar and wind energy of anywhere in the country. So there's a lot of options there, and I think that report really speaks to the need to kind of you know, exponentially increase the programs there. And I think the thing that's really the actor that's going to take notice of it the most is going to be the financial world. You know, they're going to put their money into where the world's going. So if governments aren't prepared for that, then that's going to have a huge impact on the economy. And so money talks, and I think that's one of the areas I didn't really talk about in the climate plan. Is we're also looking at ways of incorporating the TCFD standard. I forget exactly what it is, but it's a way that in the securities markets, you're going to have to report on the climate related risks for projects. That would be really important on really having that full transparency for people investing. So I think that report's a big one. And you know, I'm looking, as part of the Natural Resource Committee, we're going to be having the Canada Energy Regulator come appear before our committee. So I'm looking forward to asking some questions to them on that particular report.
Great, thank you.
Okay, I think Maureen was next. You can go ahead.
Thanks, Carla. Thanks for the presentation, Patrick. You asked for specific feedback on two things, about whether Bowen would be interested in pursuing discussions of an electric ferry. And I think I can say with certainty that Bowen is interested. We've been having conversations, to my knowledge, with BC Ferries for at least the last 9 years on the possibility of an electric ferry. So anything you can do to advance that, I think would be appreciated. You also asked about, in the context of the Rural Transit Fund, you know, the interest in an on-demand bus pilot project. And we actually had one of those a couple of summers ago with TransLink, and it was short duration, but at that point, Kevin Desmond was interested in exploring, you know, how it would work here. And David would be able to speak to it more, but I think it went well. I had a question regarding the Bill C-12, the Canadian Net Zero Emissions Accountability Act. Is that act restricted in scope to the activities of the federal government, or does it have broader scope?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's just the federal government. It'd be great if we could apply that to provincial governments, because that I think would have a bit of a forcing function in kind of increasing their level of ambition. But unfortunately, it's just the federal government's operations.
Yeah, and I am sorry to hear that, in part because one of the consistent but small sources of funding we've had on Bowen for climate-related projects is the funding that comes through the CARET program. Mm-hmm. And that was tied to community-level reporting on climate-related actions. So with the ending recently of the CARET program, we're in a wee bit of a vacuum as to what kind of reporting we do to the province in terms of our climate actions. Hopefully there'll be something announced as a replacement for that. And then my third and final point was just, as you were talking about all those home energy refits, I got all excited and I wanted to know what the public-facing materials were related to that. So went to the National Natural Resources Canada website. It's super easy to use, everybody. You plug in your postal code and you get a list of energy advisors and their phone numbers that you can get in touch with. And part of the challenge we've had in prior years is just, it's been a little bit difficult to find the information that we need. So kudos, the public-facing material is already there for some of the some of the funding that hopefully will be included in this next budget. So thank you for everything you're doing.
Well, thanks for that, and it's definitely getting a little bit more accessible. But I think the website has a long ways to go. And one of the discussions I've had with Environment and Climate Change Canada is, really like starting with the climate strategy, to really put that online in an easily accessible way where you can kind of toggle different things and link it together. Because right now it's kind of dispersed on different ministry web pages, and a lot of the measures are kind of they're quite dispersed. So I think there's still a ways to go, but I think that's a good one. It's just you put your postal code in. But that's also a good flag about the CAREB program, because I know there's a lot of work that's gone into putting together all these climate strategies right across the province, and then ending it once that capacity is built up leaves a big gap. So I know I've had some discussions actually with My Sea to Sky on some of the work that they're doing on trying to create kind of a common reporting framework on emissions from municipalities, which is about half of the emissions in the country. So I've been working with them to try to find pockets of funding for that type of work, but let me see if there might be something that would be an option, or a potential option for Bowen as well on that.
Thank you.
Okay, David, I think it's your turn.
Okay, thanks, Carla. And thanks, Patrick. And Maureen asked two of my questions, but I'm going to follow up on one of them a little bit more. And it was on BC Ferries. You said, let me know if you're interested in electrification. And as Maureen said, yeah, we are. But how would the federal government be able to help us, since it's BC Ferries is provincial, and BC Hydro, one of the big problems is getting the power to Horseshoe Bay or any of the other terminals. I know that and I don't know much about this. I know the federal government does provide money for ferries in the east, more so than they do here, I believe. So how might the federal government be able to help us on the ferry electrification issue? Any further thoughts on that?
Yeah, so maybe to the last part first. The federal government provides support for ferries in BC as well. It's pretty consistent among provinces for ferry operators, with the exception of one, which is Marine Atlantic, which serves Newfoundland and Labrador, because of an agreement that was built in for them joining confederation with the rest of the country. But as part of the national highway system, there is, BC Ferries is actually considered part of the highway, so it gets funding related to that. And I know it's been challenged. It was actually a big challenge during the pandemic to get funding to BC Ferries because they didn't get the wage subsidy because they weren't a private operation. So we had to find a different way through the Safe Restart Agreement to provide some operational funding support for them. So that is an interesting flag for infrastructure because programs are not directly meant to support the province. So that's something that that would have to be worked out in advance. What I would typically, how the funding programs for that work is through Innovation, Science, and Economic Development has a program called the Strategic Innovation Fund, which funds different types of kind of innovative projects that can reduce emissions. So that might be an option, but I'm not sure if they would be eligible through the project as it's created right now. But I would anticipate if to make funding available for any electric ferries of that size, you're probably working with operators that were at least partially public or crown corporations or things of that nature. So that's a good flag, and I don't necessarily have the answer for how that would work, but it's not just the ferry alone, it's the transmission, and it's also the charging infrastructure at the ferry terminal. So there's a few hurdles to jump through there. But actually one of the first meetings I had in Ottawa was with BC Ferries and they brought that issue up back in early 2020. So but that's definitely something to return to. But yeah, let me see what I can find out about just the funding process for that.
Okay, thanks, Patrick. And my other question is around the home retrofits, the training part of that. And you mentioned it, but I think the details, either you didn't get into details or it went over my head. We need obviously home retrofits here. A whole lot of people have put in heat pumps in the last while, but nobody on Bowen is putting in heat pumps, to my knowledge. A fellow from Squamish is doing a great business here on Bowen. So we need training that's really easily accessible for some of the newer technologies that are needed in terms of best in class buildings. So tell us perhaps a little bit more about that training part.
Yeah, so there's a call for proposals that was launched, I think it was on Monday or it might have been last week through Employment and Social Development Canada to be able to train 7,000 new energy advisors. Because if you put your postal code in, you'll see there's not that many energy advisors that come up or companies that are qualified to do it. So that's a bit of a gap, and this is meant to kind of build up that human capacity. So that funding's out there. I know there are some programs through different, like for instance through BCIT, where you can get trained to do that. But yeah, so that's an open call for proposals. I think the deadline is sometime next month for people to submit their proposals. But yeah, we're definitely gonna and I think my colleague Cassandra here just put it into the chat box. So definitely something, if you know some organizations that can train people up, we have until July 8th to submit your proposal.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. On to other folks with questions. Thanks.
So I think we have Levin next. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you, Carla. And thanks for the presentation also, Mr. Weiler. It's great to hear. And there's one thing sitting with me. If you look to the global success stories, it's not about the amount of things that you can implement, but it's about implementing them. And I sense, like, for example, the ferry. Thank you also for saying that, David. The ferry is 40% of our greenhouse gases. So we're gonna need, if we want to make a plan for the island to become even carbon neutral or carbon positive, it's not so difficult. The difficulty is matching all of these initiatives that come from federal and provincial to the local needs and then match them into each other. And that's where the support is needed. And my question to you is, how could we collaborate, or how could you support also the island in order to create the capacity to do that? Because it's easily said, you can go to that website or that website to apply, but it's proven through science, people don't do that. And so we need something, we need a muscle to train on the island, and we have enough knowledge on the islands to do that. But how could that be supported? How could we create funds for that? So I hear all of the billions, but even having a 1 or a 2 million fund on the island as work capacity, a working budget to integrate that and to make a plan that is creating our carbon positive thing, and then work it out and just implement it, that will make the change happen. And how can you play a bridging role? You play a beautiful bridging role in bringing the plan to us, but how could you be a bridge also in implementing it together with us? And that's the question I'm holding.
Mm. No, that's a great point and question. It's yeah, what matters is how it can deliver locally here. You know, one of the things I think that's been working quite well on the North Shore recently is getting the three municipalities, the federal, provincial, and First Nation governments together to look at how we solve issues related to housing and transportation and otherwise, and then getting all the different staffs to work together to be able to pool some resources. That's something that I think is an opportunity that may be a little bit different on Bowen, but I think it's just getting the staff connected and working together. And you know, I have my amazing staff member Cassandra on this call. Getting staff working together, connecting with those opportunities that we've already talked about here, and then just going through the process with officials. So you know, that's a lot of these programs are ones that I can't play a direct role in as an elected official, but the staff can work together to work through them, and then before you even submit a proposal to get feedback on, you know, if it's well you know, well developed to kind of meet the eligibility and criteria that are there. So I think obviously the best thing to have would be a dedicated person that could be you know, inserted with different municipal governments to solely focus on that. And I know that's something that I've heard from folks from the Climate Caucus in BC for municipalities, that would be the most useful. And I think it's a really good idea. And one that might be able to have the biggest impact in actually getting things done. But we don't have that program yet. But I think it is a really good. I think it is a really good idea. But I think there's yeah, I think just having staff connect and working together on those programs is probably in the interim step the best way to go. But I'd be very interested in hearing other ideas from folks on what might be some other options.
Thank you for that. Well, if you look to the leading countries that go to the last mile, Norway, Denmark, the Netherlands, the whole thing is building community-based assets, and it's really giving much more power and ownership in the hands of the community itself. And if we have one social capital on the islands, it's the community. So if you could start from there, but then be supported by the big money also, that's where big changes happen. And the last miles are made there. When you look to global examples, it's just giving one suggestion, but thank you for the offer. It would be worthwhile also having more conversation on that.
Yeah, I know that's a great point, and you know, especially with you know, when you look at how renewable energy really exploded in Germany, it was done by communities using the feed-in tariff to be able to sell back into the grid, but it was really led by communities, not having not necessarily top down. So no, that's a really good flag actually, and I'd love to explore that a little bit more.
Okay, thanks, Stephen. I've got Liam waiting to ask a question again. Go ahead, Liam.
Thank you. Yeah, one point of clarification and one question. And the clarification is hopefully not me being too defensive about municipalities. And it was you throwing out a stat that municipalities are responsible for 50% of emissions. And my understanding is that corporate emissions from municipalities represents about 8%. At least that's a BC stat that we use, but they have indirect influence over that 50%. So just trying to give municipalities a little better name there. And then the question is there, I'm hopeful that there's work being done in some of these programs around energy storage, because that's the nut that I'm hoping that we can crack, because there's plenty of energy that is available to us. but storage is the challenge. And how do we go beyond batteries? Because, you know, batteries are relatively bad, and they're a great transition piece, but to reduce carbon emissions, but they're still pretty nasty. So is there work being done on that?
Definitely, and that was part of the presentation. I didn't get into, kind of more focused on the industry side, but as part of the Canada Infrastructure Bank's Clean Growth Plan, there is dedicated funding for two things that I think are really important. You know, one on energy storage and finding, I think there's a $2.5 billion that's dedicated just for that. And I think that's really important, particularly when you're relying on renewables, which may be intermittent, but also looking at grid interties. So being able to connect grids, for instance, like, would be great if we could connect the BC grid to Alberta, but there's already actually a lot of work happening within Atlantic Canada on the Atlantic Loop to be able to take actually hydropower from Newfoundland down into to New Brunswick and Nova Scotia. So yeah, no, I think that there is a big there's a big opportunity there. Batteries are great, but they require a lot of rare earth minerals, and you know, the footprint, environmental footprint on mining those can be quite high and expensive. But even using things like hydropower as or dams as a storage facility can be quite effective too. And there's lots of research happening on different ways of doing storage. So there's some opportunities there, and particularly if we're going to have renewable energies built in, well, intermittent renewable energy, I think it's key to find ways of both having a smart grid and also finding those opportunities for storing it for when you need it.
Okay, thanks. I don't think I see any more hands up for questions, so I might just ask a question myself, if you don't mind. I was just wondering about, you said that there was a budget for natural infrastructure, and I know that that's something that we've been interested in for a while, is adding natural assets to our asset management plan. And so I was wondering what that budget item is actually for. Like, would it be for assessments of natural assets, or like evaluations of those? Or could it potentially be for land acquisition to protect the natural assets that we already have?
Well, the fund, it's for natural infrastructure. So, you know, this is something that I mentioned the town of Gibson has done quite a bit of work on this, and using particularly for stormwater management, using different natural options for that. So it is actually on the infrastructure side. It's not on the assessment and asset management. But I think the other thing I mentioned earlier on the national infrastructure assessment, I think that's something that could look at that as well. And both of those things are identified in this budget. The details are actually going through Treasury Board in the coming weeks here on what they would look like. And those are things that'll launch this summer. But I've been you know, suggesting that should include an assessment of natural assets. So I'll let you know. Well, definitely stay tuned on that one.
Okay, thanks. And Allison is up next with a question. Go ahead, Allison.
So mine sort of relates to the homeowner. And I guess because we don't have natural gas on Bowen, people either heat their houses now with electricity, which is hydro, so it's green energy, versus maybe propane. So and there's some oil furnaces around. So I was kind of surprised at the number being thrown out about greenhouse gas emissions from housing being such a large thing. But is that a national or provincial statistic versus a municipal statistic?
Yeah, so I think across Canada, buildings account for, I think, 10% of emissions, kind of somewhere in and around that range. And so I should have clarified about emissions from municipalities. It's not direct corporate emissions. It is within kind of municipal boundaries that it's about half. But yeah, so I think it's about 10%, but that does include also commercial buildings as well.
Yeah.
So it would be much less for residential, but they are some of the low hanging fruit in terms of projects that save money and reduce emissions and so forth.
But I guess that's the question. If we're heating our houses with hydro right now, we're not going to be reducing emissions if there's no emissions to reduce.
Well, you still, I mean, even with hydro, there is still a level of emissions that you have from that. There's an environmental impact. It's lesser, of course, than if it was produced with many other types of energy. But there still is a small level of emissions that you do have from that, and so it would reduce your carbon footprint, but lesser than if you lived in an area that relied on fossil fuel energy.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Sue Ellen, do you want to go ahead?
Thank you. Sure. Hi, Patrick, and thank you for your presentation. It's heartening to see climate action coming about in these times. It's great to see it coming federally. I have a question about the natural asset stuff, following up on Carla's. We have been following several of us on council are following carefully what Gibson's and other communities are doing. On Bowen, I think we're more interested in the freshwater provision than stormwater management side of the infrastructure. Our infrastructure is kind of these three big crown water towers we've got here, the three mountains, and yet they're crown land. So they're sort of, we've had some industrial logging threats. Some of us have perceived as threats to our water supply and water quality in these times of increasing climate change. So can you anticipate ways that we might be able to do some planning for watershed protection through the natural asset budget plans that you might have in place?
I'm not sure if the Natural Infrastructure Fund, again, it hasn't been fully finalized at this point. Typically those funds, if you are successful in receiving them, do have a little bit for planning work as well. It's not a huge amount, and there's already some of that work that needs to be done just to put together a proposal, which I know can be a big barrier. In terms of if it is an actual environmental protection project, there's different funds through Environment Climate Change Canada. There's one that might be interesting called the Eco Action Program that I know has supported some wetland protection on the coast recently. So there might be some options there, but typically that is just for the actual, the infrastructure itself. But that is actually something that's come up on a number of different calls I've been on related to infrastructure. So that's a message I'll take back for folks in infrastructure.
Thank you. I think I tend to call it planning because I don't have another name for it besides acquisition, but there's got to be something in the middle that means protecting and caring and stewarding our water storage and supply through the natural assets that we've got. So I don't know exactly the term, but I'll keep an eye on that Eco Action Fund. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Fawn. I think Don Nicholson maybe had another question. Don, did you have another question? Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Sorry about that. The what was it called? Oh, the Commissioner of the Environment and the Sustainable Development. How will that person get chosen, assigned, or will that be a government position, or can anyone apply? Like what? Not that I'm thinking of applying, but
well, there already is a person that serves in that role.
Okay.
So they're an officer of Parliament. I think they sit under the Office of the Auditor General.
Oh, I was worried about that. I was worried about that. Okay, enough said. Okay, thank you.
But yeah, so that position, there's been someone in that position for some time,
Okay.
and they do independent analysis of different government programs related to the environment.
Well, and will they have any more sway than the Auditor General seems to have when they seem to point out attributes that, you know, should be of concern, that are of concern, but don't seem to get the same level of concern that he or she seems to bring up? I mean,
yeah, well, I mean, their role is to do that independent analysis, which, you know, forms the basis for government action. And if the government doesn't act, then I think that opens up a level of political vulnerability. And so I think I'd have to look exactly at the terms of reference of her role, but I know she's done some really great work already. And particularly on Bill C-12, that's one of the critical accountability functions, is having that independent analysis.
It's not going to be in a situation where the government's suing itself, kind of thing, right? I mean,
well, I think the folks that could sue the government would be, I think what you're seeing in some of the climate litigation now are younger people, future generations, for not acting. So those reports can help form the basis of that.
Yeah, got it. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Don. I have a couple hands up still, and I think Allison might have had another question. Allison, did you want to ask one more question? No? Okay, great. So Maureen is next, and then I think we probably just have time for the two more questions, one from Maureen and one from Will Husby after that.
Okay, thank you. I imagine you're having somewhat similar conversations with all of the other municipalities nearby. And we have been keeping an eye on Gibson's and its work on natural assets. Are there some projects or plans underway in our neighboring municipalities that you think we should be keeping an eye on, that they're important and that we might be able to consider for application on Bowen?
That's a great question, and this is actually the first discussion I've had specifically on climate, focused on a municipal plan. But you know, after this, I'm realizing I should do this with every municipality. And I know, I mean, they're different contexts, I think, for each municipality. I know actually Whistler has just finished theirs recently, and they've since then proposed their big moves where they want to reduce emissions. And some of the things are things that Bowen's already done in terms of, you know, not having natural gas heating within buildings is one of the ways of reducing emissions. But for them as well, it's the vast majority of emissions come from transportation, people coming in and going up and down the sea to sky. So that's a really good yeah, that's a good idea, actually. And, you know, maybe one of the best forums to look at that would be through the Howe Sound forum. I know there's lots of, you know, usually each forum takes one particular topic. That might be one that would be really good to just kind of focus on some of the highlights and have some of those experiences and lessons learned to be shared. But yeah, I wish I had some really good ideas of ones that I can share. Obviously, the town of Gibson's in terms of natural infrastructure. I know the district of West Vancouver has done some great stuff on economic valuation of ecosystem services that I think could be looked at too. But that's something I need to do a little bit more of my homework on that. But I think it would be great to have that type of discussion in that forum.
We could suggest it to Ruth Simons and see if she's interested for the Howe Sound forum. Thank you.
Go ahead, Will.
Hi, Patrick. Thanks for doing this. It's very encouraging and very helpful. I'm a chair of a advisory committee for the community, and we look at climate action and environmental protection. And one of the things a small community like us has a real difficult time doing is knowing what our natural assets are and where they are and how valuable they are, like what they're doing for us. You know, it's things like keeping our water clean. Sue Ellen mentioned, you know, we've got 3 natural water towers and that are the mountains and that kind of thing. And one of the things that the community just doesn't have the assets for is to do an inventory, an accurate inventory of that and mapping, so that when a development is going to come up, we know where the places are that should be protected and how important they are and that kind of thing. So we're not doing things like these little piecemeal developments that take away a little wetland and you know, it's death by 1,000 cuts for some of our natural assets. And so I'm wondering, is there some kind of support the federal government can do for little communities to make these inventories so that we can integrate them into the planning and protection bylaws that a municipality does?
Yeah, I don't know of an existing program for that, but I would reach out to, actually I had a conversation earlier today with Isabel Gordon, who works for the District of West Vancouver, and she did their natural assets assessment. And she did it using information that was already available, but just putting it through a criteria that a certain national body, and I forget the name of it, but it's NAMI, that they have like a specific accounting standards that they use to value natural assets. So they've been able to use that to I think the figure they got for the natural assets within the municipality was something like 3.2 billion. And but there's a specific methodology that you can use. One of the challenges she said she had was there was some kind of aerial mapping that needed to be done. That was the one new expense, but everything else was information that was already available. So that might be a good good conversation, particularly at the staff level for Bowen Island Municipality to have. And I know there is kind of a national body that's kind of certified that approach. And I know they meet every year, and so that might be one if for further conversation.
And they're run by Manny Emmanuel, the CAO from Gibbs. That was his brainchild.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Patrick. I just wanted to pipe in here just to, just in the interest of time. It's about 20 after 8. We are scheduled to end at 8:30. I do have a question. And then if everybody's fine, if everybody doesn't have any more questions, maybe we can have some final words from Patrick, and maybe Councillor Hawking or Councillor Nicholson would like to have some final words. But I just wanted to ask one question about the Ocean Protection Plan, and if there's any works or any funding or any talk at the federal level of replacing that program, as it is, I believe, coming to the end of its life shortly. It's very important from my perspective as staff at the municipality. We've tapped into a lot of funds there over since 2016, I guess, or 2017. And yeah, just was wondering if there's any talk of any sort of pot of money.
Yeah, well, you don't have to tell me about the importance of that plan, and what some of the funds that have come out of that, particularly in terms of abandoned and derelict boats, which has been really critical. Some of the programming that was supported through that plan, particularly related to salmon, we have a different program we've put out through the budget, which is a very big program, a $647 million program to focus on research, habitat restoration, and hatcheries for salmon, for instance. And some of that work before was actually funded through the Oceans Protection Plan through the Coastal Restoration Fund. So that I think there's some pieces of it that are appearing in other ways. But I don't have any information I can share about kind of a successor for the Ocean Protections Plan. But if there are some particular funding programs through that you're interested in, I'd be very interested in knowing what those are, because I can look into it a little bit more. And if there isn't that type of support there, it's something I can bring up with Minister Alghabra and Minister Jordan, as the case may be.
Thank you very much, Patrick. So just a reminder to everybody, this recording, this link to the recording of the session will be up on our website on our Climate Action Program page on our website. And we'll have the slide bank. Cassandra has said that she'll pass that along. So if anybody wants any information or has any further questions after tonight's session, please, I'll put my email in the chat as well. It's bonniebrokenshire@bimbc.ca. And I'm just really grateful that everybody showed up tonight. And with that, I don't know, Councillor Hawking, if you have any final parting words, and then Patrick, if you could maybe say a few final words as well, that would be fantastic. Thanks.
So who goes first, me or Patrick? Patrick goes first. Okay.
Sure. Well, yeah, happy to do that. And well, I just want to say, thank you so much for having me tonight. And this has been some great discussion, lots of really good questions, and really exciting to see, the leadership on Bowen and the work that you're doing in this space. And I think we're both quite keen on how we can do even more. I do have some action items myself coming out of this, particularly on natural assets and infrastructure, and also on making sure some of those programs that are put together are not going to exclude Bowen based on being part of Metro Vancouver. Programs like the SARE program, where there might be future support there, and ways of really finding that dedicated person or support to assist municipalities to access some of these programs are some things I'm going to look into a little bit more. So yeah, that, electric ferries, and a few other things I have some homework to look into. But yeah, I'd love to find ways where these programs can work best for the island. And yeah, I just appreciate all the great questions and feedback, and always happy to have a discussion on this some other time as well. And thank you so much for hosting, Bonnie and David, for your introduction.
Thanks, Patrick. I just really want to thank you for this. You have a very big riding. You know, the riding with perhaps the longest name in the country, but it's really diverse, and we're just a tiny little place. So for you to give us this kind of time was really appreciated. And your presentation was excellent. Really gave a good detailed overview without getting too nerdy about it. But your ability to answer questions, you're really paying attention to the details, and you seem to be able to have an answer to everything, which is really quite marvelous. I was sitting here thinking, gee, I don't know how to answer that if somebody asked me that question. But anyway, so thanks so much. And I also want to thank all I saw 26 people in the participants. So thank you all for taking some time to learn a bit more about what's happening in Canada and what's happening in Bowen, and what we could all be doing to help ourselves deal with the real emergency we're facing. So thanks so much, everybody, and good night. Unless, Maureen, do you have anything to add? No? Okay. Thanks, Bonnie. Thanks, Carla. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night.
Thanks, Patrick.
Good night.